lantern. We have this abandoned cemetery in our neighborhood. If you drove down our road, you would never notice it unless you know where to look. It's a tucked away, peaceful little plot surrounded by trees. The plot was sealed off by a wrought iron fence adorned with spikes to keep out delinquents. The tombstones gave off an unkempt vibe. Said tombstone seemed uncared for, but that's simply not the case. People who drive by said plot at night claim to see a hooded figure with a singular lantern with an eerie glow, a dying light to not disturb those resting in the graves, tending to the graves, keeping them tidy. This figure has been dubbed as a local urban legend with many names. Some call him the Lantern Man. Some call him the Ghost of the Cemetery. But most people know him as the Groundskeeper. Being the skeptic that I am, I didn't believe in such legends or lore. So I decided to do a little trespassing with nothing but my light and explore this seemingly abandoned cemetery. To no one's surprise, nothing happened. The seemingly abandoned graveyard was abandoned, or so I thought. That's until I moved my light over to the southernmost grave. That's when I saw it. There it stood, tearing away moss from one of the headstones. It calmly turned to look at me with such eerie grace. I remember being frozen, almost entranced by its eerie lantern. Foolishly enough, I decided to stay and take a photo. That's when it began slowly gliding over to greet me. That's whenever I decided to book it. To my negligence, I decided to be foolish and try and climb the fence. Its spikes dug into my hands. To my surprise, the figure stopped on the other side. It seemed uninterested in pursuing me further. It seemed like it only wanted me off its land, and it was not up for negotiation. It glared at me with disdain for invading its land. I hightailed it home. To this day, people claim to see the singular eerie lantern of the groundskeeper who guards the graveyard. One thing is for certain, it doesn't welcome visitors on its grounds. If you see a tree grow overnight in your local cemetery, do not cut it down. By teaandtachyons. Dad always said Oak Ridge Cemetery was his life's work. 27 years as a groundskeeper, and he knew every tree by heart. The old oaks, the weeping willows, the strange ones that seemed to sprout overnight whenever we lost someone in town. I never questioned it until I took over after his heart attack last spring. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every death, every single one, followed by a new sapling pushing through the soil by morning. Perfect, straight trunks, leaves that whispered even without wind. The town council wanted to clear some space for new plots, so they sent Jim Weber, the logger, who'd worked these parts for 40 years. I watched him approach the youngest tree, the one that appeared after Mrs. Nevetsky's passing last week. His chainsaw sputtered to life, and something in my gut screamed to stop him. But I didn't. The first cut revealed rings that weren't rings at all, but tiny, intricate faces frozen in silent screams. Hundreds of them, spiraling from bark to core. I recognized Thomas Perry from when I was a kid, Lauren Trumbull from high school, Dad. Each face marked the day someone in town had died. Not just when, I realized with growing horror, but why. The patterns told stories, a cluster of rings showing hands around a throat, another displaying a cup of poison tea, pills dissolving to nothing. The faces in the outer rings belonged to the people who were still alive. Jim dropped his chainsaw. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, backing away. His own face stared back at us from the wood, eyes wide with terror, a dark stain blooming across his chest. That night, a new tree sprouted over his grave. I tried burning the evidence, but the smoke formed shapes that haunted my dreams. Now, I understand why Dad never cut them down, why his hands shook when he walked among them at dusk. These aren't trees, they're witnesses. Sometimes at night, if I strain the edges of my awareness, I hear them growing. The soft creak of wood expanding, of bark stretching tight over new revelations. The leaves don't just whisper anymore, they sob. And in the morning, I find new saplings with my neighbors' faces already forming in their tender cores. Yesterday, I noticed something different. My own face, emerging in the rings of every single tree. Not in the past or present, but in the outer edge. Waiting. And they're still growing. Mary DeLuca by the Prowler. On Halloween night, a group of friends decided to spend the evening at the cemetery. They had heard of the urban legend of Mary DeLuca on the internet and wanted to investigate. You see, the legend goes, back on Valentine's Day in 1988, a girl named Mary DeLuca, age 22, answered the door for her boyfriend, Robbie Stevens, who proceeded to hand her a dozen roses and a heart-shaped box of Russell Stover's chocolates when she did. It said her face lit up with excitement when she saw her boyfriend standing there. She grabbed the roses and the chocolates. She told him how much she loved them and him. But when she began to smell the roses, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Mary looked down and saw her boyfriend's hand hard pressed against her stomach, and he was holding something, a knife. She looked back up into his eyes in shock, completely confused at why the person she loved more than anything in this world was stabbing her. He then pulled the knife from her stomach and sunk it into her beating heart, a heart, they say, that only beat for him. Now, no one knows why Robbie did what he did. He claims he doesn't remember those few moments at the door with Mary, that when he came to, she was on the ground already dead, and he had no idea why or what had happened. There's also claims that he told police in the interrogation room everything that transpired in the doorway, and that the devil whispered in his ear for him to do it. Whatever the case, they say he escaped on Halloween night and visited her grave, bringing her roses on her favorite holiday. No one exactly knows what happened, but they say Robbie was found the next morning by the groundskeeper face down. It was believed that his insides were torn out and his heart removed, never to be found, and he had a rose stuffed down his throat. No one knows for certain what happened that night. It was officially reported that he did himself in. But if those other rumors are true, then there's no way he did it. The police are the only ones that know what happened to Robbie. Many believe Mary's ghost exacted revenge on her lover, and the police just covered up the irrational with something rational. So ever since then, teenagers have visited Mary's grave, trying to see her ghost. And there have been plenty of disappearances over the years as well. They say visiting her grave on Valentine's Day night is the best time to awaken her spirit. Others say Halloween night is the time, her favorite holiday, and the night she exacted revenge. In reality, any night is fine. Just bring some roses and dust off an old box of Russell Stovers, and you'll be set. So here we are, Halloween night, and the group of friends that consisted of Finn, Ralphie, Sarah, Angela, and Rosalie decided to spend their Halloween visiting Mary's grave. Sarah bought a dozen roses, and Ralphie said he would bring a heart-shaped box of Russell Stovers he saw collecting dust in his father's closet. It was very chilly that night. It was quiet when they met in front of the cemetery gates. All that could be heard was a hollow, eerie breeze and their faint whispers as they greeted each other. It seemed especially dark that night, so they lit some candles, hoping to set a romantic mood and to help light their way. Angela seemed hesitant right off the bat, while Finn was leading the way, egging everybody on. Rosalie shot back quick and teased Finn that Mary was waiting for him, that he was going to mess around tonight and get himself a new girlfriend. They all laughed and continued walking, searching for Mary's grave. They made their way over a tiny hill to the back fence of the cemetery, where they came across Mary's tombstone. The wind began to pick up as the group stood there staring at her grave, tree branches scratching other tombstones in the distance. "Here she is!" Finn shouted. Just as the words left his mouth, a gust of wind blew past the group and snuffed out the candles. It was now silent. Nothing could be seen, it was so dark. Angela stood there frightened, more than ever before, up to that point. She called out to her friends. Nothing, just the sounds of branches scratching and the hollow wind blowing. She tried again, and this time she heard whispering. It was all around her. She started to tremble. "Stop it, you guys!" she shouted with a slight tremble in her voice. The whispers inched closer and closer. Angela began to shake uncontrollably, then silence. She stood there frightened more than ever before, mumbling to herself, begging for them to stop. Then at that very moment, a raspy voice whispered, "Boo," right next to her ear. Angela screamed out in terror and ran off, dodging tombstones in the dark as she made her way back to the hill. She stopped to catch her breath and turned back to where her friends were. As she did, She saw the candles being relit and heard her friends begin to laugh. They started calling out her name and told her to come back, that they were just joking with her. Angela was pissed. "Ha ha! Real funny, you guys!" she shouted, as she began to walk back to her friends, filled with a combination of embarrassment and anger. She heard one of them say, "Shh." "What's that noise?" She barked back, saying, "That's enough now. No more tricks." But when she heard that, every candle blew out again, and the cries of pain rang out into the air from her friends. She stopped in her tracks, frozen, not able to move. She tried to speak up, asking her friends if this was still part of their sick joke, but the words just wouldn't come out forcefully. As she continued to stand there, though, she began to see her friends' flesh being ripped open and them gargling on their own blood. She couldn't see what was happening, but she knew she had to get out of there. She turned and ran as fast as she could, fast as she's ever ran in her entire life. Back to her house, where she ran upstairs and locked herself in her room, not speaking to anybody. She tried to reassure herself that they were still playing a cruel joke on her, and finally fell asleep from the sheer exhaustion. Her notions of them continuing to be joking were quickly answered, however, when in the morning her parents walked into her room, asking her if she knew where her friends were, that their parents had been calling around and they were getting worried. Angela sat up in her bed and began to cry. She realized they weren't still joking. She told her parents everything that happened and led the police to Mary's grave, the last place they were all together. When they happened upon the site, some of the officers said it was the most gruesome thing they've ever seen or will ever see in their entire life. The group was ripped apart, seemingly from limb to limb. Their hearts were all ripped out and stuffed inside the Russell Stover's heart-shaped box, with roses all stuffed down their throats. Virginia City, Nevada Boneyard, circa 1979, by O.K. Calligrapher, 9854. In the spirit of the season, here is one of my real-life ghost stories. I used to believe in ghosts when I was a kid. Aside from Star Wars, my expertise was ghosts, Nessie, Bigfoot, UFOs, and spontaneous human combustion. This was after I lost interest in Legos and drawing dinosaurs. As a kid, I had many paranormal encounters, UFO sightings, and even did my own search for Bigfoot during every hike in the woods for scouts. Once I entered high school, I turned more to science and girls. All of those many paranormal encounters when I was little, I've since debunked. That ghost I saw running toward me in the fruit orchard behind our house turned out to be a white shirt hanging from a branch. It was left behind by a migrant worker during a harvest. Those Ouija board scares at my best friend's house, his dad admitted to moving the thing around just to watch us boys lose our shit. His mother still maintains her house is indeed haunted, however. The ghostly shadow I saw walking in my best friend's house after one of those worst Ouija board scares turned out to be from a damaged lampshade that was spinning slowly. I've debunked every sighting, event, an encounter except for one. I'm over 50 years old now, and I still can't explain how this happened. Paranormal event. Virginia City, Nevada Boneyard, circa 1979. We enjoyed a family road vacation almost every year when I was a kid. For example, we drove from California to New York State when I was 2, so I could meet my East Coast grandparents. During the summer of 78 or 79, I was about 10. My mom and dad drove us kids from California to Yellowstone, then up to Mount Rushmore, down to Mesa Verde. And our dad never stopped moving. 5 minutes to get out of the car, look at the Grand Canyon, then it was back on the road to reach the next postcard destination. This was his idea of a great time. On the way back home from Mesa Verde, we stopped in Virginia City, Nevada. That's where I once believed I experienced a paranormal encounter. We had a great time touring the town and shops of Virginia City. It was just like an old West town I'd seen in all of my favorite cowboy movies. I was thrilled when a Western-style shootout happened on Main Street. The loser had squibs in his torso that exploded fake blood, and he fell near my feet. I was surprised and proud to have a drop of fake blood on my shirt. I wouldn't let my mom wash that shirt for ages. It was a 10-year-old boy's idea of the most awesome day ever. At one point, my dad took me and my younger sister to the cemetery. I think we were killing time, while my mom took my younger brother to the restroom. We stayed very close to my dad. My sister held his hand. I was trying to be brave, so I didn't. Cemeteries were spooky to us kids then. Anyway, I was obsessed with the birth years and death years, and fairly good at doing basic math in my head. So I was very focused at each plot, crunching the numbers on every date listed to determine age of death, proudly calling out my answers. Our very road-weary dad would grunt his approval in response and walk to the next plot. My enthusiasm dimmed when I realized just how many women died in childbirth. Their babies had the same death dates as their mothers. Soon, I was silenced by the overwhelming population of kids and babies in the place. The event I will never forget happened at one large family plot. I was looking at the headstones of the kids when I suddenly fell forward onto the grave without warning or intent. My dad yelled at me to stay off the graves. He'd already warned us it was taboo. I still can't explain how or why I fell. My sister, who was 7 or 8, still remembers because it scared her. She said I simply fell forward as if I fell asleep, except she could see I was still awake. I don't recall tripping, losing balance, locking knees, fainting, feeling a force or a push or pull. I didn't lose time. I simply fell, completely conscious, onto the grave of the dead kids. I caught my fall with both hands and was frozen in fear for a moment, staring at the ground and bottom of the headstone. Picture me mid-push-up, with my knees on the ground, frozen, shaking, scared to look up at the headstone. I don't remember standing up. It really scared the hell out of me. And that's it. I still don't know what happened. I haven't debunked my sister's belief that it was indeed something paranormal. She fully believes in ghosts and thinks I was pulled towards the grave. I used to believe the same. While I no longer believe in the paranormal, I don't have an explanation for what happened to me in the Virginia City Boneyard back in 1979. Epilogue. I hope you enjoyed my retelling. This is the true biographical version of a story that has been embellished over the decades. I used to tell the embellished fictional version as a ghost story around campfires for kids and scouts. The tale has always been told in the oral tradition. This is the first time I put any version of this story to paper. Pet owners beware. It's always a nice, comforting feeling when it's a cold winter night and your cat decides to come snuggling into your bed against your legs for some warmth and company. It can be a moment of bonding between yourself and a pet, a moment of kinship between two species, and a cute story to tell your friends and family. But not so much when you remember you had to put her to sleep 6 months ago. Nobody Ever Died in a Cemetery by Hack Shuck. I know it sounds like the premise of a cheap horror movie, but when I was 6, my family, in need of a fresh start after all my parents' arguments, moved to a small cottage which backed onto an old cemetery. Mine was the only bedroom facing the graveyard, which fascinated my friends when they visited, but none were willing to sleep over. I tried to get a restful night's sleep, but it wasn't made easy, even after my parents seemed to reach a truce. For every night at midnight, I began to hear a horrible, anguished wail, like a banshee's cry, emanating from a small rise in the darkest, most overgrown area of this burial ground. And this tortured cry began to dominate my thoughts. My dad soon grew concerned by my drained, pale face and air of listless lethargy. My father's words, meant to comfort me, I guess, were to not worry about ghosts because I slept near the one place on earth guaranteed to not be haunted. Because, if you think about it, nobody ever died in a cemetery. But my slumber only dissipated further, to the point where I'd still be awake by daybreak. Nobody else ever seemed to hear the tormented shriek, which marked every midnight like a disturbing inverted church bell. So finally my mom decided to take me by my trembling hand and lead me around the cemetery one cool October afternoon. The graves were ancient, names and dates worn away to mere fragments. None bore flowers. Thorns and weeds choked the ground all over. Finally, I reached the rise from where I'd heard the odd nocturnal sound. My little legs were terribly unsteady as I climbed onto the small hill, but all I found was muddy ground. My mom had grown increasingly morose as we approached, and she spoke with a voice broken. "This is where they used to bury unbaptized children," she told me, "and crazies, and people who took their lives. Problems dumped and destined to lie forgotten, unmourned." "One person visits, Mommy," I insisted. "I hear them every night at midnight." My mom's voice grew distant, dissipating in the high wind. "Your father cannot forget, nor should he, ever." I realized as I stared down onto bare earth, churned as if fairly recently disturbed, that I was already starting to forget my mom's face. Trust test. It's 1:24 a.m. Who is calling me at this ungodly hour? I asked myself. I reached for my phone and answered it. I would usually put it on silent, but considering the time, it must be important. Hello? Laura, it's Amy. You have to help me. I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. Oh my God. Calm down. What's happening? Jim and I decided to hang out at the cemetery down the road. He was so eager for some adventure that he entered the prohibited zone. I was too scared to follow, so I went back to the car and decided to wait for him there. But when he came back, he acted differently. He... I don't know, Laura. You have to help me. I don't want to stay home alone tonight. I'm scared. Can I sleep at your place tonight? I was scared as well, but being a good friend, I said yes. Before we hung up, I heard someone banging on my front door. Who is it? I asked. Laura, it's Jim. Amy and I decided to hang out at the cemetery down the road. Playing a game of toe tag by Hack Shook. December the 19th was a date that meant nothing to me until I woke up the next morning with a tag hanging from my right big toe. But the name of the deceased wasn't mine. The next morning, I found the same toe tag. And the morning after, I live alone, and if I wasn't already paranoid enough about checking each evening that my apartment door and windows were locked, I certainly was afterwards. I tried setting up a camera to record my persecutor, but it captures nothing but my restless sleep. Perhaps ghosts don't show up on recordings. At least, I hope it's a ghost, and nothing worse. Stephen Megson. I'd barely thought about that kid in years. His death was a tragic accident. That's all, an accident. If anyone was to blame, it was him, sprinting straight out into the street from behind a parked car. Cause of death? Traffic accident. See, the toe tags prove I'm right. An accident. And besides, Steve died in October, not December. Over 17 years ago now. Time flies. 3 months of toe tagging passed before I snapped. Drugged myself and removed my own toe. You can learn practically anything on YouTube. The next night I suffered terrible dreams of asphyxiation and awoke inside a body bag and have done so every night since. It's difficult to break out of a body bag, especially when you're hysterical with a mortal terror. Stephen Megson. I asked around discreetly. I wondered if his mom was still alive, to maybe give me some answers. Much as though I hated awakening wrapped in plastic, I'm afraid to mess with things too much. Afraid that I've already made things escalate. I'm afraid that I might wake up one morning inside something worse. Like a coffin in the earth. I couldn't conceive of anything worse. Found out that Stephen's mom died last December, on the 19th, to be precise. She couldn't face another Christmas away from her baby boy. He was only 7. I was 9. Nobody ever knew that it was me who'd chased him into that busy traffic. Nobody knew we were playing tag. I hadn't even attended his funeral. as I was too afraid of being found out. Today I finally visited Stephen in the cemetery. Well, sort of. There was only a memorial plaque with his mom's name recently added. Turns out that my fears of being buried like Stephen were ill-founded. He'd been cremated. I wonder what tonight's dreams will bring, and wonder if asphyxia is a lesser terror than incineration. The invisible cemetery in my backyard. I've lived so many years in this house, watching it fall to ruin, and my life too. First my daughter died, then she went in the ground. Then my son died, sweet and quiet, and he went in the ground. Not even months later. Things happen in threes, as they say. So my other son, the focus of this story, died. I couldn't bear to lose another, so I went outside and stood above his grave, planting the flower that never seems to age. It's violet, striking in the rain. David, another sweet boy. He would be back soon, I told myself. So I went grocery shopping, preparing for one of the elaborate feasts I knew he enjoyed. That night I did cook a feast. Chicken and mashed potatoes, his favorites. But David never showed up for dinner. He was never late for dinner, and I told myself I knew that he wasn't coming back. So I nodded off in the recliner, facing the back door. I woke up to the sound of its familiar creak, my heart skipping a beat. Not of joy, no. The terror was pretty much instinctual. David stood in the doorway, dirt clinging to him, skin green and covered in mold. "Hello, Dad," he said. "Hello, David," I replied. The fear built in me, and I knew I had to ask one more question. "Why do you look so happy?" I asked. David stepped forward, the thumping of his uncoordinated limbs making me even more afraid. "Because, Dad, things happen in threes. Didn't you know?" David stood there, dirt falling off him in clumps. It took me a minute to figure out what he was saying. Death wasn't the only thing that happened in threes. 1878. 1878. That's what the number on the right says. The one on the left can't quite be read. I know it's 1863, but I may be the only one who knows. I think there could be a record somewhere in a long-forgotten drawer of some county-level bureaucrat, but I don't think anyone's looked in a long time. Moss covers up what's left of the name. I think a K and an M, maybe an N. It's hard to tell with how the weather and plant growth have treated the stone over the years. Not too many people walk by this part of the cemetery, and those that do aren't here for me. Oh yeah, I should mention, I'm the one under the grave. I died when I was 15, typhoid. Got my brother, sister, aunt, and 2 cousins, all within the span of 3 months. My parents were devastated, visited me every week for a while, brought flowers, cried. Then they came every month. That changed to once a year as they got older. Then it was just my mom, since my dad joined me 2 graves over. She stopped coming once her health got bad. My youngest sister visited all of us for a while, but she moved 2 states away and then didn't come back. She got buried with her husband there. 1922. That was the last time I got a flower. It was a single rose. A little girl came with her dad to visit her mom. They had a whole bouquet of roses. The little girl dropped it for me on accident as she walked past. I haven't had a visitor since my sister. You see, death isn't that scary. I'm pretty comfortable in here, honestly. What's scary is that you're forgotten. Everyone you know or who you knew has died too. And once that happens, if you don't leave anyone behind, you're left behind. I was a person with hopes and dreams and aspirations, but no one knows me now. No one knows my favorite color was blue, and my dog's name was Pajamas, and my favorite treat was ice cream. No one even knows my name. But you're here, so I'll tell just you. My name is Wedding Day. Bridget had wanted a big wedding her entire life. That special day with everybody from her school, her street, her old job, and her church could attend and celebrate her, Bridget, for a change. Bridget was twirling in front of the mirror in her long flowing custom-made gown. The long white train at the back sat heavy on the floor, much too heavy to carry alone. She was waiting for her mother to arrive and carry the train down the aisle. Her mother, the only guest of the day, besides her and Mark. Like she said, it would have to be big on spirit and not on guess. The legalities of the affair could be dealt with after. The witnesses, the certificates, the registry office. All Bridget today wanted was the spirit of the wedding to be complete. As the mother that raised her alone walked her down the aisle, and Mark, the love of her life, handsome in his black tuxedo, smiling at the approaching princess. It was all a surprise to Gail as she entered to see her daughter all in white. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Mother, but today is finally the day," Bridget said, beaming from her dress. "What are you talking about?" Gail said. "The day I marry Mark. Here, with you, in this house," Bridget said. Gail had been humoring Bridget's eccentric ways for the past year, but an impromptu cowboy wedding was the strangest moment yet, and Gail could feel the dread rise in within the pit of her stomach. Not again. "Honey, where is Mark?" "He's waiting for me in the garden, of course. He can't see me before the day. He's under the special gazebo I made." "Good," Gail said, mediating to her daughter's impulsivity. "Do you want me to walk you to him?" "Would you, Mother? Would you please? I wrote our own vows. Hold my train." Bridget was holding the crumpled vows in her hand. Gail held the train of the dress from behind. As they walked through the living room, Gail was taken aback by the amount of crap she'd been collecting and had left cluttered up in this small house. She's hoarding again. A cloud of dust rose from the floor as the dress gently tickled the rotting floorboards. Under the gazebo was Mark, posed in a deck chair with a tuxedo scruffily thrown over his limp body. There wasn't a smile. There wasn't the husbandry a groom has for his bride. There wasn't even a look of recognition. Mark was impassive, deathly impassive. "Oh, honey," Gail said, "you have to stop going into the cemetery and digging up this man." The tears welled for Bridget as the delusion of the happiest day of her life dissipated into reality. "But he was my fiancé," Bridget said, her voice wobbly. "Look how happy he is." Mark's smile had decomposed as the skin had rotted down to bare teeth. "Bury me." My friend Horace was always superstitious, especially about death. In fact, most of our conversations revolved around the concept. He was obsessed with it. Except Horace always focused on what he wanted me to do with his body after he kicked the bucket. "I don't want to be buried. Not in this town. On this continent. Not on this earth," he said, completely stone-faced. He started saying this a few months before he died. After Horace first said this to me, I asked him how this was possible. He just shrugged and went back to eating his burrito. When he finally died on one cold and overcast day, it caught me by surprise. I think because he talked so much about death, part of my subconscious thought he was impervious to it. It was Horace's mom who told me, over the phone. Her voice had been mysteriously calm, like he hadn't died at all. At the time, I figured it had to do with shock or something. She told me to come over, and I did. She also told me not to tell anyone, and she wouldn't either. Horace's last request. "Or it won't work," came the words, which sent chills through me. After I made the short journey, she opened the door in tears. "I have a job for you. I hope you know how to use a shovel." In his room, I sat and read the journal, and it told me everything I needed to do to comply with Horace's beliefs. Take his body through the closet door, the shovel too. On the other side, dig a hole in an unclaimed patch of earth. I did everything it told me to do, eventually heading back through the door in the middle of a rambling cemetery that seemed to stretch on for miles through a thick mist. I was surprised to see Horace sitting on his bed, right where I found myself, in his room again. He looked like a corpse, green and dead in the eyes, mold growing in his hair, as if he'd been in the ground for weeks, not minutes. "Hello, Miles. Thanks for honoring my wishes," he gurgled. "If you hadn't, I wouldn't have been resurrected." Then it occurred to me that where I buried Horace must not have been on Earth at all. Not on this Earth, anyway. Some alternate dimension with similar characteristics, but where the laws governing life and death were slightly different. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdark and 2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.